Hi, today we're going to go over the AP Style Guide number 2, which focuses on numbers and times. I want you to know the following entries in the style book. It helps if you tab the entries that I've gone over so that you can get to them quickly. And I'm not going to go over everything in the handout, so make sure that you look up the entries and go over them yourself. It also might help to follow along in the style book as I go over these, or you can just follow along on the sheet. The first thing you want to know is the numerals entry. Numerals are very tricky, so every time you see a number in a story, make sure you look it up. The basic rules about numbers. Basic rules about numbers. The first rule is 0 to 9 are usually spelled out. 0 to 9 are usually spelled out. There are times when they're not spelled out, and I'll go over those. 10 and above are always figures. Always figures. Except if it's the first word of a sentence. So anytime you see a number that is over 9, you would use figures, except if it's the first word of a sentence. And if it's a very long sentence, if it's a very long number, like 9,725, you want to rearrange the sentence so you don't have to spell it out. Notice that 9,725 has a comma. Anything over 3 numbers is going to have a comma. You know that, so make sure you use the comma properly. The only number that you don't spell out to start a sentence is a year. And like I said, rewrite the sentence to avoid beginning with a large number. Ages. Ages are always figures. So if you have an age, make it a figure. Percents are always figures. Percents are always figures. And then the word percent is always spelled out. It's one word. And don't use the percent symbol. Please remember this. It's just basic stuff that you should know. If you are going to do an internship, whether it's public relations or news, you've got to know this stuff. So ages, always figures. Notice it's always figures. Even with months. Notice if you have a compound modifier, it uses hyphens. But if it's not a compound modifier, you don't use hyphens. For instance, he is 9 years old, doesn't have hyphens. Okay, addresses. You want to know all this stuff. Names of streets are always capitalized. That should go without saying. House numbers are always figures. Numbered streets are spelled out below 10. So First Street, but 24th Avenue, because it's over 9. 24th Avenue, it's over 9, so you use a figure. And then this is the tricky part. There's only three words that you abbreviate. Street, boulevard, and avenue, and only with addresses. Only with addresses. Numbered addresses. If you have a numbered address, you abbreviate. So, he lived at 4 First Street, you would abbreviate street because you've got the number 4. But if you just say he lives on First Street, you wouldn't abbreviate it because there's no numbered address. But that you want to go over because that's going to come up a lot, and you want to get those right. AM and PM, just notice the spelling. Notice that it's a small, lowercase letters with periods. AM means before noon, PM means afternoon. Here's some examples of how you would use that. I'm going to go over this again, but notice there's no zeros after 8 a.m. You don't need the zeros. Don't use things like 12 noon or 12 midnight. Just say noon and midnight. And then don't use redundant constructions. For instance, 7 a.m. this morning. That's wrong because a.m. means in the morning, so you wouldn't need to say 7 a.m. this morning. Remember, I'm gonna upload just a regular PDF of this so you can go over it, or you can print it out so you'll have it. Dimensions. Dimensions use figures and spell out the words inches, yards, feet, etc. So for instance, he is 7 feet tall. 7 is a figure, and then you spell out feet. Don't ever abbreviate feet or use quote marks. She is 6 feet 8 inches tall. Notice there are no hyphens in there. That's not a compound modifier. The following is a compound modifier. The 5 foot 6 inch tall man. That is a compound modifier, so you would use hyphens. When in doubt whether to use hyphens, you probably don't need them, but look in the style book and see if try to make your sentence fit the examples they use. They've got a lot of examples in there, so you can just plug in what you're doing and see which example it fits. All the entries in the style book have examples, so you can use those. Okay, sense. If you ever need to talk about sense, you want to spell out sense. Don't ever use the cent symbol. Don't use that. And then use figures for the amount. So 5 cents, 12 cents, that kind of thing. Dates. Use figures. But don't use ST, ND, etc. Look, it's 25, September 25th, January 5th. Notice there's no TH. No TH. Now notice that is an exception to the rule. You're supposed to spell out under 10, but that's an exception to the rule. But it makes sense. Okay, days of the week, very easy. Always capitalize, never abbreviate. Always capitalize, never abbreviate. Dollars. Dollars is different than cents. Remember, in cents, you spell out the word cents. With dollars, you use the dollar sign. But you always use figures. So he spent $5 at the store. Notice you don't say 0.00. You don't need that. He has $375.12 in his bank account. That's how that would look. Months. When you're writing dates, you have to do certain things with the months. I want you to know that. There are certain months that you never abbreviate. I want you to know which ones they are. Just look it up in the style book under months. Look it up in the style book under months. So know which months are never abbreviated. And then know when to abbreviate the months. Because there's a certain time you abbreviate the months and a certain time you don't. Well, you only abbreviate with a specific date. You only abbreviate with a specific date. So for instance, if I just said I was born in September, you would not abbreviate that because there's no specific date. If you say I was born on September 8th, you do abbreviate that because there is a specific date. You see the difference? So it's just like the addresses. Remember, you only abbreviate street, boulevard, and avenue when you have a specific numbered address. Same thing with the dates. You only abbreviate the month when you have a specific date. That comes up a lot, so make sure you know that. Okay, time element. If you're talking about an event that is going to happen within 7 days of publication, then you would use the day of the week. If it's happening within 7 days of publication, use the day of the week. What do I mean by publication? If it's going to be printed, that's a publication date, whenever it's printed. If it's going online, whenever it goes online, that's its publication date. If it's more than a week away, use the date. Never use the day of the week and the date together. It's redundant. And then don't use the year unless it's confusing without it. You usually don't need the year. Like, for instance, if I said something is going to happen October 5th, you wouldn't need to say 2013 because it's obvious that that's going to be 2013. If it's happening next year, then use the year. Like the spring semester starts January 15th, 2014. That would make sense. Okay, time, day, place. I think I went over this earlier, but let me repeat it because it's very important. When listing time, date, and place, use that order. Time, date, place. So it would be, the meeting will be at 7 p.m. Tuesday in City Hall. Time, date, place. If you only have the day and the place, then just use those. But still use that order. If you only have the time and the day, use that order. Note there are no commas in this construction. You don't need commas when you're saying time, date, place. And also note that there's no on before the day of the week. You don't need on before the day of the week in this construction. You don't say the meeting will be at 7 p.m. on Tuesday. There's no need for on. Whenever you can take out a word and it still makes sense, take it out. Times. Use figures except for noon and midnight. Use figures except for noon and midnight. And remember, don't say 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. Say noon and midnight. Here are some examples. 8:30 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 p.m., 11:25 p.m. Notice that there's no 0 after the 9 or 10 because you don't need them. You don't need them. You only need the colon when there are numbers after the colon. All right, so that's a lot. You need to study this stuff. You can always look it up while you're writing and have the entries in the style book, but you don't have to memorize them. But what you have to do is you have to know when to look things up. So you have to know, there's a month. Okay, I better look it up. There's a numeral. Oh, I better look it up. Oh, I'm using the time. I better get that right. Maybe I should look it up. Don't guess. Look it up. I know it takes a little extra time, but it's going to make your writing much better. And, when you have an internship, you're going to need to know this stuff. Remember, the only way to get a job is to have internships. Whether it's PR, advertising, TV, online, print, the only way to get a job is with internships. And the only way to do well in your internship is to know this stuff. So do study it. All right, well, if you have any questions, give me an email. Talk to you later. Bye.